Hey everybody, in this video we're going to cover the Divi theme in depth. We're going to walk through the page builder and learn how to create and structure our pages, as well as how to use the various modules that come with Divi. After that, we're going to look at the websites of some of the biggest companies in the world like Apple and Microsoft, and we're going to see how we can recreate them quickly and easily using the Divi builder. Now, I've seen some of the other tutorials for Divi, and they're all like 2 to 3 hours long, and nobody has time for that shit. So my philosophy when I'm learning new stuff is the 80-20 rule, which is you get 80% of the results with 20% of the time and effort. So in this video, rather than covering every little detail, most of which you'll never use, we're going to cover the main modules that you're going to use every day. And if you do end up needing something that I don't cover in this video, you can always just go to Elegant Theme's website, look it up, and do it and learn it then. But there's no point learning stuff if you're never going to use it, right? So with that said, let's get started. So now we're on the back end of our WordPress website. We have Divi installed. It should be known that this is a follow-up to my previous video on making your website from scratch. So if you don't have a website right now, you can go to that video and you can get your hosting, you can get set up. If you do have a website right now and you're thinking about purchasing Divi or whatever, you can also click the link in the description and get that. And then once you have Divi installed, you can unpause the video and follow along. So the first thing we're going to do is look at our Divi theme options. So we're going to scroll down here and open those up. Once we're here, for the most part, you're going to want to leave most of the settings as they are. But there is a couple like logo where you can upload an image, and that will allow your logo to appear in your header bar, as well as the favicon, which is the image that appears in browser tabs when people are on your website. A couple other things you might be interested in are the Google API key, which if you want to do like if you have a physical location for your business, you can paste that key in there and then you can make Google Maps on your website. The last thing in the general tab is going to be custom CSS, so you can either grab code snippets off other websites and customize your appearance of your website like that, or if you know how to use CSS, you can also put your code here as it is and make those modifications. The other big thing in the general theme settings is going to be you want to grab your API key from Elegant Themes and paste that in there so that you can update your website. If you want to do analytics and tracking, you also have the integration tab where you can paste in your Google Analytics script, and you don't have to deal with uploading another plugin or anything like that. You can just do it right here in your theme settings. Last thing we're going to cover back here before we move on to the visual builder is going to be the Divi library. This is what allows us to export and import layouts and custom modules to our websites. So what I really use this a lot for is if I make some module on one website and I don't want to recreate it and I think it'll be useful for another website, I'll just export it, and then it saves me a bunch of time that way. So that's another thing you might be interested in. So now what we're going to want to do is create a blank page so that we kind of have a empty canvas for us to experiment with and show how all these modules work and how we can structure our pages here. So we're going to wait for this to load, and once that's all loaded, we're just going to call it practice page. Doesn't really matter what you call it, but and then we're just going to publish it, and then we're going to go to the new URL that we've made. And once we're here, we're going to click Enable Visual Builder, and that'll take a few seconds to load. So now we've got our page builder loaded up. We can see we have a few options. We have build from scratch, which is what we're going to use for this tutorial, but you also have choose pre-made template, where you can pick from hundreds of different styles and layouts that Elegant Themes provides for free. So that's pretty useful just for getting something started real quick. And then you also have clone existing page, but for now we're just going to use build from scratch. And then we're going to create a row, and we're just going to make a call to action module. Now the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at how the structure and the layout of this page works. So that you can see the difference between a section, a row, a column, and a module. So we're going to add another row here. We're going to make it 2 columns. And we're just going to add more call to action modules. And one cool feature here is that we can just duplicate and then we can drag it over here. So now we have 2 rows and 1 section. So to see, the easiest way to see this structure here is we're going to go to Design and Box Shadow. And then if we add another section here, we can see where they separate. So we can see the space here. And now we need to go into each of these rows and modules, and we're going to add that same box shadow. And then we can see, it makes it a lot easier to see and kind of understand what exactly is going on here and how this page works. So now that we have those box shadows in place, it makes it a little bit easier to see how a page is actually divided. So we can see the big block here, which ends here, is the section. And within that section, we have our 2 rows. So you can see the division between the rows right here. And within those rows, so this is you have your columns. So this is a 1 column row, and you can see the shadow going all the way across. And then within here, you have your 2 columns, and you can see the shadow where it ends in between here, and there's a little padding in between. So, and another thing to keep in mind is this module. So then you have your modules as well, but there is a distinction between the column and the module itself, because if we go in here and change the background, we can see that this is the column underneath. So that allows you to do some different styling and stuff, because you do have that column that is there. You don't really see it unless you go in there and make these adjustments, but it does exist. So now that we've seen the structure of our page, now we're going to go into how we can modify it. So the easiest way we can adjust padding and margin here is you can see this little where it highlights a little bit, and then you can drag it up and down, and you can do that between any section, or any row. If you want to modify in between the rows here, you have to click here and go to Design, and this is where you can adjust alignment. So if you want it to touch one side, or by default it's in the middle, which is where I usually leave it. Another big thing is you can make it full width. If you want these to touch, if you don't want it to have this blank space here, you can do that. You can also do gutter width, which is a big one. If you want these to touch, you can just drag it down, or you can widen it out. So that's another useful little customization. Another big thing, if you want more fine-tuned, you can go in here and adjust padding and margin. The way to think of the difference between padding and margin is margin's on the exterior, so it pushes away. Padding's on the inside, so if you pushed the padding on this module, it would push this text down. If you increase the margin, it would create more white space. So that's how you really should think about margin and padding. And that, if you want to look into it more, look up CSS margin and padding, because that's what this thing changes, as a CSS variable. So as far as structure of the page and adjusting it, that's about as much as I'm going to cover. But the best way to learn how to do all that stuff is just to mess around with it. So go in, make an empty page, and just adjust all these different variables, see how it works with modules, see how it works with rows, columns, sections, all that stuff. That's going to be the quickest way to learn how to do all that stuff. So the next thing we're going to learn about is this bottom bar, which has quite a few different things you can do. One is zoom. If you have a bunch of sections For really big pages, this is a pretty useful tool. You can zoom out and get a kind of a bird's eye view at the whole thing at once. You also have wireframe, so if you don't want to see all the detail, if you once again you want to kind of filter some of that stuff out, you can see it'll break it down into rows and the name of the module. So you can see now all of our calls to actions, all that stuff. Another couple useful things are you can see the mobile view. So right now we have it set to desktop, but you can also see the phone view and the tablet view. So that's good for kind of optimizing things before you go live, so you can see exactly what it'll look like on all types of devices. Moving on to these purple icons, the first one is the load from library. So that's, once again, if you've imported some layouts or modules, or you've already have saved them from other pages on the website, you can load them from there. You can save, so if you want to save a whole layout, you can do that. You can trash it if you want to start from scratch, you can do that. This is just to shrink them, to get rid of that bottom bar. Page settings is actually pretty useful. You have split testing, which is what allows you to present two different versions of the page to visitors. So it'll randomly present different styles if you want. You can have one page that has a different version of a form, and what this is used for is like it would be called conversion rate optimization. So if you own a store or something and you're trying to make sure you make as much money as possible, this allows you to test how different layouts of your page convert, like which version of the page gets more sales. So that's a pretty useful feature. Going to advanced, custom CSS is also another useful feature. You can put in your CSS here, and you can set a tag on any of your modules, and then you can just leave it here. Then you don't have to have it, you don't have your CSS spread all throughout these different modules. It's just on the main page setting. So that's probably the two most useful features there. You then have your editing history. So if you want to roll things back, if you mess something up and you don't know what setting you changed, you don't know why it's messed up, you can just roll it back to whatever version you want. So that's nice. And finally, you have your portability. So this is once again export, import. You can do all that there. You can export to a file directly right here. And finally, you have your ability to save your page so that your changes are preserved. The next thing we're going to look at is this main editing pop-up. You saw it before when we were messing around with these things, but I didn't really go into detail. So basically, regardless of what you click on, you're going to have these same three tabs. You're going to have content, design, advanced. What's going to change depending on what you're clicking on is going to be your content, the options available here, and a few design settings. Advanced is pretty much always the same. You can put in custom CSS, you can give it a class, you can also disable it. Like if you have a certain row or something that doesn't look good no matter what you do on phone, you can just make sure it never shows up on phone. So that's pretty useful. But so you can see here we just have background. For our row, we just have the background option. If we click over here onto our call to action, you'll see we get a bunch of different. We have our title, we can change a button text. If we put a link in here, you'll see a button will pop up here. So you can change the text in here. So if you just want to click submit, like if you had a form or something, you can do submit or whatever you want. And this is the content. So if you have an image tab, if you have an image module, which we'll go into in a little bit, it'll ask you to upload media and all sorts of stuff. So content is going to be the big thing that changes depending on your which module you're using. Design tab is once again similar to content, where depending on the elements inside the module, the actual settings will vary, but basically whatever is in this module, you can adjust it. You can adjust font size, color, whatever. It's all very customizable. So the last few things I want to look at before we move on to individual modules are some shortcuts that'll save you time as you edit. So big thing is that you can right click on your modules and it'll pull up a little options tab, so you can disable elements right here, you can split test, you can save to library, you can undo for that specific element. Another cool thing is you can copy it directly and make a new one. You can copy just the CSS styles, all that stuff right here. So instead of having to go down to all these different parts, instead of having to click into it, open up the tab, or move all around, you can just right click, pop that open. If you want to save even more time, you also have the keyboard shortcuts. So just like a Word document or anything else, you can click Control Z and you can undo. To redo, it's Control Y. You can also click Control S to save instead of having to click the save button. And last, you can click Control E to exit out of the builder. So that basically covers the core concepts for our front end builder. We went over structure, we went over sections, rows, columns, individual modules. We went over how you can adjust the settings for each of those, as well as some shortcuts. So now we're going to go directly into how to use individual modules and really the most common modules you'll be using when you make websites. The first module we're going to look at is the Blurb module, and before we create that, we're going to want to clear away what we were working with earlier, so we have a fresh little page, and we're going to go with a 2-column row and then just type in blurb. From here we're just going to replicate this a couple times, so we're going to click duplicate, and then we can drag it over. So the thing the blurb icon is really good for is quickly creating a summary of some information, and you'll see this on a lot of different websites. They'll do what the blurb lets us recreate these really quickly. We can have an image, we can have an icon, and then we can put some text down you can summarize if you're a business, what your services are, all sorts of stuff. So if we go in here, clicked on the row, if we go in here and we can change the title and the body content. You can also, if you don't want to change in here, you can click directly here and you can also delete and edit text. But what we're going to do for the blurb is come down to image and icon, click icon, and then you have built-in, you have quite a few different options, but we're just going to pick a folder, and then you can go in here and you can edit the size and the color, and you can also add a circle like that and edit the color for that. But we're going to move it to the left to reposition, and we're also, if we click here so we can see our whole screen, we're also going to adjust the size down a little bit. And we'll click save. Now the really cool thing here is that we can copy the style. So if you right click and use that shortcut we saw earlier, we can copy that, copy the module style, and we can come over here and paste it. And now the only thing we have to change here is the icon itself. All those styles are already copied over. So if you have the text to a certain size, a certain font type, you don't have to recreate that 10 different times. You don't have to go in there every time and redo those steps. You can just copy it over. So that's a really handy trick that Divi lets you do. So we're gonna go icon again, and like you have a lot of built-in. And if you don't see one that you like, you can also upload it as an image. So there's tons of different font packets out there, like Font Awesome. So you can look around for that, Google for that, and you can just upload those to WordPress, and then you can use them as an image, and you'll have a nice little icon for your website. So the next module we're going to look at is the call to action module. So we're just going to clear out this row and then add a single column. And basically what the call to action module is really good for is kind of a header. So if we go in here, we can just add any fake URL so the button shows up. But basically with every website, you have a goal, you have something you want people to do when they show up on your website. So, for example, if you have a store or something, you want people to buy whatever you're selling. So you can, as soon as they get on your website, you can hit them with a message and you can direct them to take an action. So that's what I generally use the call to action module for. So you'll set the section background, and then to make this match, you'll go into the module and you can set the background for this as well. And now you have a really nice little call to action so that you can direct people. And you'll also want to adjust this. You can adjust the spacing on this, and it's just a really clean look for your website. Another option for your header is kind of a variation on the call to action, which is the full width slider. So something we really haven't gone into yet is that in addition to the regular section, which is what we've been using, there's also a specialty in full width. So the full width will basically, as you probably would expect from the name, it'll cover the entire width, and you don't have to go into the row section and change it manually. So that if you for sure want it to be full width and cover the full length of the person's screen, you can use this type of section. And then we'll go down to full width slider, and then it automatically builds this out, and you can add slides, you can do multiple. So if you have different posts that you want to cycle through, like most popular posts on your website, or if you have multiple items you'd want people to look at in a store, you can add this and it'll cycle through. You can set it up so that it is on a time transition, or you can make it so they have to manually click to the next slide. But you can also set images, colors, or even videos as the background. Another thing you can do if you go into the slide is you can also do an overlay. So if you want a little bit of to dull the color a little bit with a black overlay or any color, you can go in there and you can adjust the opacity as well. You can also add images to the side of it. So if you wanted to list a sort of image in there, like if you had a product, you can add that in as well. Alright, the next module we're going to take a look at is the image module. And really I'm going to go over how to deal with images when you're working with Divi in general, because for me at least, images were one of my biggest frustrations with Divi when I was starting off, just because it can get kind of, if you don't know what you're doing, you can get really frustrated with the formatting and all sorts of stuff. So like for example, if you're making a full post title, you're going to want to make sure the formatting is right on your image, otherwise it can get pixelated, parts of it can get cut off, and it'll just look terrible, and you'll spend a lot of time trying to get it working right, and you'll get pissed off. At least that's how it worked for me. So what you want to make sure is that for widescreen shots, like a full width image, you're going to want to make sure the pixel ratio is 16:9. So that's like a standard widescreen, so that way it'll have the full image and it won't have to cut anything off or stretch it out. Like if you tried to do a square image on one of these, you're going to have to either stretch it or you're going to have to cut it off. For these, your aspect ratio is ideally going to be 4:3, but you can also get by with just a square photo for the general module. So specific features of the image module are that you can make it so when you click on it, it'll link out. So if you have an image of a product, you could put that in there, and when they click on it, it'll take them to that spot of your store so they can buy it. You also have an option where you can open it in a light box, so if they click on it, it'll do a nice little close-up shot. So if you're like a photographer and you want to put pictures up for sale on your site, that might be something so you can let people get a closer look of your images. There's also, going back to rows that we went over earlier, like gutter. If you want the images, if you have two images next to each other, so if we duplicate this and drag it over, you might want them so they're touching. So this is again going back to page structure, where you're going to want to go to your row, and then you would adjust the gutter, not spacing, so you can make it full width, and then gutter, and then you can make those things touch. So that's another thing where regardless of module, you're going to want to know these things related to rows, sections, all that stuff. The next modules we're going to be taking a look at are the toggle and the accordion modules. So they're both they're basically an accordion module is just a collection of toggle modules. So what they're good for, that we see here, is if we click on one, they all close, and you can have basically as many as you want. So they're really good for like a frequently asked questions page. So if you have a product and you just want to put down a list of answers to questions, you can use the accordion module, and that way you don't have a massive page filled with walls of text that most people aren't interested in. When somebody goes to your frequently asked questions page, they might have one question. So you don't want that whole page of text. You just want so they can go and find the question they're looking for, and they can just get their answer right there. The toggle module is just an individual one, which what I like to use it for is kind of adding some interactivity. If you have like a blog post or an article, it gets kind of boring to just read. So sometimes you can sprinkle these in there, and then they can, to see the rest of the content, it keeps them engaged. So if, let's say like you're writing about a recipe or something, you can put that there, and then you can include with a list, you can list all the stuff for the recipe in there, and that way it's just another thing to kind of keep people, so they're just scrolling blankly down the page, they might see this, and then it'll kind of draw them back in. And by default, it's a pretty boring, it's just gray, and it's pretty bland. So you can go in here, and just like any other module, you can adjust the text, the coloring, all that stuff. I like to, sometimes you can kind of shave off the edges on the border if you want, and make it a little bit more rounded. You can also then go in and change the coloring as well, which is what I generally do for the background. And you can do something like a yellowish color, and that by default it'll automatically apply that when it opens up too. So if you click on that, you can see it takes care of all that for you. So next on our list of modules we're going to go over is the Maps module. So what this one does is it allows you to put a Google Maps, embed it right into your website. So what this is good for would be, for example, if you have a physical location for your business and you want people to visit your store, you could put this on your contact page or wherever, and then they can visually see and where they need to go to get to your store. So to use this, the first thing you're going to need to do is get an API key from Google. So to do that, you just go into Google and type Google Maps API key, and that'll just click on the first link, and you can get that pretty easy. It's free, so that's no big deal. Once you get that, you can go back into your dashboard, and that we kind of covered a little bit in theme options, but if you go to general settings, you'll see where you can copy and paste that. And once you've saved that, it'll automatically get pulled in here. Once you've got that set up, you can just do a type in whatever address for your business. For example, let's use the White House, and generally it'll automatically fill that in. So now we got our map, and we can also add, see, because we're just in the general area here, so what we want is to add a pin so you can show directly where your position is at. So you can once again put in the address, and then it'll drop this little red marker right where you want it, and from there you can kind of fine tune. If you want, you can fine tune, actually you have to do it on here, but you can adjust it. If it's not exactly how you want it, you can just move it around a little bit, just put it wherever you want. So that's another useful thing. You can also put in a text, so when they click on it, you can populate it, so whatever text you have there, when it pops up, if they click on it, the stuff you have in here will pop up there. It's not working for whatever reason now. That's basically, as far as the map modules go, that's about all you need to do. As far as controls, you can adjust so they can't move it around if you want, but for the most part, I just leave these all to the default settings. The next module we're going to take a look at is the contact form module. It's one of the most, as far as Divi goes, it's got a ton of features, and there's a lot of different stuff you can do with it. So by default, it gives us just a name, an email address, and then a form or area where a person can type in a message. So the main thing you want to make sure you do is set an email where the emails from this form will be sent to, because otherwise people will fill out the form and it won't go anywhere. So that's the main thing. You can also, by default, it has this little captcha to make sure that it's not bots filling it out. You can either get rid of that or keep it. You can redirect after somebody fills out the URL, after somebody submits the form. So if after somebody sends it, you can send them to a different page. Another thing is you can add more fields. So if we go in here, you can title it whatever you want, and then you can also choose between length. If you have like a message and you don't want people going forever, you can keep it short. You also have you can do between radio buttons, and then you can add, once you select that, you can add multiple. So one idea you could do with this is, with radio buttons, you can only select one at a time. So if you wanted to forward emails based on like different information they provide, so you could have it send to the default email that you set up for the form, and then based on which of these checkboxes they mark, it can forward it to a different email. So if you have like different departments or different areas to focus on, you can forward it to different people based on that. And same thing, you have checkboxes as well that you can choose between. And then also, which we have here, is input, email field, and then like a text area. A little more advanced is you can do conditional logic. So you could set it up so that if the length of the message is so long, or if it's too short, you can just reject it and it won't send. There's quite a bit of stuff you can do with that. But for now, most people, you're just going to be using the generic form. So this would be good for like a contact page. You can just paste this in there, and then from there, that's all you really have to do. You can customize the button and the appearance, but beyond that, out of the box, you get what most people are going to need 99% of the time. So the last module we're going to look at is the code module. So it's a pretty versatile little thing. Depending on your skill set, you can do a lot of different stuff with it. The main thing that anybody can use it for is pasting in scripts from different tools and different like analytics tracking. If you have like a sales page or a landing page, you can create a custom tag with like Facebook or Google Analytics, and you can just paste it in here, and that'll automatically, you don't have to go into your back-end settings and mess around with that. You can just do it for one page. Another thing, if you know how to code, you can come in here and you can do a script tag, and then you can do whatever you want. You can, if you want a custom feature, I've used it in the past for like data visualization. I'll make a chart and then I can just paste it in there. So this is really, it's a really handy thing if there's some module that, or if there's some feature you want for your website that the modules that come with Divi don't cover, you can just kind of customize it with some JavaScript, all sorts of stuff. So that's another module that I've used quite a bit. So the last thing I kind of want to go over for this tutorial is that just going over watching this video, you need to practice really with Divi to get a good feel for it. So what you should do if you really want to improve as fast as possible is you should go to some of these websites that I have up here, like at Microsoft and Apple, and you should look at the website and you should kind of think in your head, what can I do? Like, what modules could I use with Divi to recreate this? So if you look at the header, you could use a header, you can modify the header with the theme customizer to try to recreate this. You'd adjust the spacing in between, you'd adjust the hover effects. To do this, you'd use a text module here. You could do a button and adjust the style so that it's just like a link. You could also do a full width image. This is how they do that. So you'd have a full width image with some text over the top, and you could adjust the spacing so that there's an overlay. So that's really what you should be thinking about when you look at these websites. So like, let's go to Microsoft. This would be like a full width slider plugin. Down here, this is a blurb. They use images, and then you have your text. That's basically, you could recreate that with a blurb module. Down here, again, it's basically just a full width slider, but they only have one image, so there's no, you can't click here, but you have the button to click to a shop. Same thing, more blurbs. Here's like where it showed where you can push those images together to create a montage, to create like a kind of a montage type of thing, or I guess the actual word would be a mosaic. But moving on, another thing, once again, this is an effect you could recreate with blurbs. This is kind of just a text module with different styling. So you can see, like, these are websites of huge companies, and you can recreate all this. Even this is basically just a, you could recreate this with a contact form, adjust the background, all this stuff. So basically, what you need to do to really take your skills to the next level, you have a basic understanding of what you can do with Divi. You have a basic understanding of how the structure works. The best way to really get a fundamental understanding is to practice. So start off by copying, and then once you've copied a couple and you've gained some confidence, then you can move on to making stuff from scratch. So that's it for this video. I tried to cover the stuff that when I'm doing my work that I use most often. I probably left, there's going to be some gaps in your knowledge just because I tried to move through this as quick as possible, but that's alright. That's part of learning, really, is you have to fill in those gaps yourself and gain some confidence by working through some problems and struggling a little bit. I have more content related to WordPress if you're looking for how to improve how fast your site loads, stuff like that. I have a video. I'll also be doing some stuff related to like using the WordPress dashboard, more generic stuff like that. So if you're interested in that type of content, like and subscribe, and that's it.